Hey, welcome to the Happy Rant podcast. I am Ted Cluck, joined as always in studio by my good friends, my partners in radio, Barnabas Piper and Ronald J. Martin. Baby, are you still blissfully ensconced in a hotel room at a conference somewhere, living the life that you were put on this earth to lead, or are you back?
Boys, sadly, I'm back.
Yeah.
Sadly, the dream of re-entering the conference world with TGC. It was good. It was a great 2.5 days, but sadly, it has come to an end. And now I'm back, going back doing what I just don't want to do, which is life.
Yes, well, that's it. And what the conference provides is a break from life. And if only there was a conference that was year round, baby. You know, that's the dream. But speaking of dreams, boys. Someone sent this in the group chat. It was Pipe with the caption, "He might be out of the steak business, but he's not done with cows." And it was a bit of a cattle flex by Maddie Chan on Instagram, who apparently
a cattle flex. You just coined a new phrase.
Apparently Maddie Chan owns the cattle on 1,000
I'm really
hills.
jealous of people who get to cattle flex. That sounds amazing.
Oh man,
Well,
cattle flexing is what I aspire to.
I think this is the whole point of the Instagram post, which is like you would never. Okay. So like if you were a mega church pastor, you would never walk out into your garage and just do the pan thing where you pan around like all of your amazing cars with your phone and be like, look at all that I've amassed. But like seeing tens of thousands of dollars of cattle running around in the backyard and filming that is apparently that's on the table.
Well, let me ask you guys this. Speaking of tens of thousands of dollars, do you have any idea how much a cow costs?
I was going to ask you guys. I literally
if you told me a cow cost $180, I'd be like, it sounds maybe a little low, but it could be.
Yeah.
If you said it was like $18,000, I'd be like, maybe, possibly.
I don't know.
How much is beef worth?
Maybe we can have listeners chime in on this. I know we have.
Yeah, I have an Amazon cow.
Yeah, we have some people
so I'm not really.
We have some people in the farm community that I know do listen to the program. So maybe they can chime in.
Give us some. Price out some cows for us, listeners.
Yeah.
We need to know how much cows are.
You know what? Go ahead, Pipe. Yeah.
I was going to say, given the cost of like a New York strip steak at Kroger, I feel like cows have to have
a lot.
Yeah, they must cost a lot because it's like whatever, $10 or $8 per pound or something. And there's a lot of pounds on a cow.
Boys, remember one thing. Before you can cattle flex, you got to cattle shop. And I think we're in the shopping. I think we're in sort of the shopping.
You're saying that we're on the shopping side
phase.
of the cattle
Right, we're in the
flex
shopping
industry.
phase of figuring out how we want to eventually be cattle moguls.
Yeah, kind of the market research even. Like, what's the overhead going to be on these here bovines?
Yeah, for sure.
You know what makes
it's exciting. It's really exciting.
It's big, baby. You know what makes me sad though? I made my Maddie Chan owns the cattle on 1,000 hills joke, and it just kind of got lost. Like I made it at the wrong time. I was so eager to make it, and in fact, I called it in the group chat last night. Anyway,
and it was good. It was well received.
So
it was
good.
well heard.
It was well received. I appreciate you boys and just your kindness vis-a-vis the cattle on 1,000 hills joke that I made.
I think this is why I would be a terrible stand-up comedian, because any joke I prepare in advance, I always land at the wrong time because I'm just like looking for the opportunity, and instead of the prime opportunity, I take the first one, and it's never quite right.
I rushed it. I was like a dog on a chain with that joke. I was like a cow. I was like a cow in the pen at Maddie Chan's sprawling estate. So
cow in the pen.
Hey, lest we bury the lead here. This is the point. Matt Chandler's done well. That's what he wants you to know from that. Oh my gosh!
Do you think that was the main point of that Instagram sermon?
I think it might have been
cattle flex.
Hey, I've done well. Did you see Piper's contribution to the group chat, Ronald?
I'm going to see it right now.
We can't say it on the air probably, but it's brilliant.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Fair.
See, this is why I'm better on a podcast than on stand up, because I could never have written that joke in advance. But thank you for teeing it up, Ted. And listeners, you just have to imagine what I did with landing a joke too early.
Yeah, incredibly fifth grade of Piper, but there it is.
But very on brand, very
in the flesh.
Exactly. Well, boys, speaking
as
of
my wife as my wife told me last week, I am a grumpy old man with a child's sense of humor. So,
ultimate compliment right there. Ultimate compliment.
Yeah, I wasn't offended at all. I loved it.
Speaking of teeing it up, boys, we've got two rather serious topics to discuss this morning. But before we do, Piper, tell us about Dwell Bible.
I would love to tell you about Dwell Bible. So, listeners, you are familiar with Dwell Bible if you've been with us for any amount of time. It is our favorite audio Bible app partner. And instead of just listing all of their features again, I'm going to give you a brief vignette of my interaction with Dwell app this week and why it's worth your time. Earlier this week, so we have staff meetings all day on Tuesdays at church, which are great. I love it. But also Wednesdays, I'm generally kind of meeting hungover. So I was super tired Wednesday morning. Didn't really have time to spend any focused time reading my Bible because I had to run to other meetings. And was just kind of at a spiritual low point. And so I turned on Dwell and I found a playlist of theirs that was the benedictions from the epistles in the New Testament. So these are all of the prayers and blessings that Paul and the other apostles gave in their letters. And it's just about 12 or 15 minutes of hearing prayers for the people of God. And it was so rich and exactly what I needed at that particular morning. So that's just an example of how Dwell fits into a life that's tired or busy or whatever, and the kind of thing that that you have access to if you go and check it out. Go to dwellapp.io/Happy Rant. You'll see the discounts for our listeners. It's 10% off an annual subscription, 33% off of their lifetime subscription. And they have that. They have a whole bunch of other lists they put together of psalms, of prayers, of different things, along with all the features I've mentioned on previous episodes. So again, dwellapp.io/Happy Rant. Go check that out.
Piper, excellent work as always.
Yeah, good work.
By you. Boys, Pipe sent along two really intriguing topics last night, and I want to get into the first one. I'm just going to read Piper's text in the group chat. He says this: on a slightly more serious note, can we discuss how Christians fetishize public figures who leave the faith and how weird the internet makes the whole thing? And before you hopped on the call this morning, Ronald, I had a couple minutes with Pipe, and he brought me up to speed on a couple of these that were reported recently. Just the big announcements, the huge maelstrom of reaction from the internet. Pipe, I'm going to throw it to you first since you proposed the topic. What do you mean by the word fetishize? I think I know, but let's explain it for the listeners.
Yeah. So first, I just want to say, I have no interest in discussing the individual cases of this because that would fall into the what I would call fetishizing. So the reason I raised it was because it's the Christian's reaction to somebody leaving the faith that I think is so weird / bizarre / I think sinful on occasion. Yeah. And so the fetishizing is just there's an immediate groundswell of reaction somewhere between overt sort of concern, or at least that's the way it's posed, or judgment, or saw this one coming. And the internet makes it weird because it's all public. So earlier, within the last week or two, a guy named Paul Maxwell put out a video announcing that he was leaving the faith. He had been in the kind of the conservative reform theological camp for a long time, had written for a bunch of kind of faithful theological websites and stuff. And the response to it was everything I just said. And then a few days after that, the New York Times actually put out an article about my brother, who has a significant TikTok following, and a lot of what he does is kind of attempting to dunk on evangelicalism and a lot of what we believe, and he's pretty public about it. Obviously, he's got almost 1 million followers, and the responses to both were. I think the thing that struck me was if somebody announced they were leaving your church and said, "I'm just not a Christian anymore," and they just left, and there was no internet, the response would be a few people who know them reaching out, pursuing them, seeking to talk to them, maintaining a friendship, whatever. There would be a few people sort of quietly gossiping in a corner. Mm-hmm. There would probably be a public period of prayer for those people. And the news would not get outside that circle. It wouldn't be news at all.
Mm-hmm.
And the internet has completely changed that dynamic. And it's become a thing that we kind of, it seems almost voyeuristic to me, and not in the sexual sense, but in the like reveling in other people's misery sense. That there's sort of a Christian voyeurism about the pain of public figures or the departure of the faith in this case.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a really crass, lowbrow version of entertainment, which, like, I think one of the functions that the internet has served over the last 20 years is kind of muddying the waters between what's news, what's entertainment, what is gossip, right? So instead of 3 people in a corner gossiping, you have 300,000 people publicly gossiping. Yeah, I think the word that I always go back to on this is just, it's gross and it's sad. And even, and I'll throw it to Ronald in a minute to get his thoughts on this, but I think, Pipe, even the announcement of the apostasy has become in and of itself performative. So the person who's doing the leaving of the faith, you know, they make a video, they craft an essay, they kind of build a platform around leaving the faith. Whereas I think in your previous model, all of it was done quietly, right? There wasn't sort of a performative, and now I'm taking a big bow kind of moment with it, which just to me makes it sadder, more complicated, grosser, et cetera, et cetera. Ronald, make sense of all this.
Yeah. Oh, dude. It's symptomatic of the age, right? It's hard to know what else to say about it other than given, the access we have to dialogue and dialogue unkindly and gossipy and slandery about everything everything that exists in our worlds, small or large. I mean, it's really up to the church to embody, the characteristics that we're supposed to as followers of Christ, right? I mean, there's a time to discuss certain things, and there's a line that gets crossed when discussing an item becomes, slander and gossip, and incredibly insensitive given, all the different people and that can be attached to it, when you think of an online platform. And then what it does is, like, Pipe, this, it just typically spirals into all of these other things to where you're not even talking about the thing anymore anyway. And so I don't know, it's just it's the it's the dialogue of our age for sure. And I don't know, it's like all sin until somebody decides to, repent, until somebody decides to say, hey, I don't want to be characterized by that. I don't want to be known as somebody who is getting some sense of pleasure from seeing the downfall or seeing the mess of somebody else just exposed publicly. And instead, I'm just going to be quiet about it. I'm going to pray for that person. How is it ever going to change? I don't know. It's just such an insidious, you just said, Ted, it's like, it's a gross thing. I'd go as far as say it's not only just gross, it's just kind of insidious. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No,
when did we get so bad of recognizing what's not our business?
Yeah, that's a great point.
Wait, that's a great point.
I mean, a person puts a public video out announcing that they are leaving the faith. This has happened multiple times. Instagram posts, videos, whatever. I mean, we could list probably half a dozen people off the top of our heads who have done this.
Sure.
And like you said, Ted, kind of in that performative, platformy way. Mm-hmm. And the immediate reaction is, if it's public, then it's our business. If it's public, then it's news. Why?
Yeah.
If a celebrity gets drunk and runs down the street naked, is that everybody's business? I mean, in one sense, those who saw it have that much connection to it. Those, but at the same time, the reasonable thing to do is to turn away, to kind of not revel in the shame of another person. And I think that's what I've been convicted about it, because what we do on this podcast is often riffing on public figures. I think we've tried to do it in a way that's not just sort of, for lack of a better term, just crapping on those who have failed.
Right.
But how did we get so bad at recognizing that's not my business? I don't need to know that. Not only do I not need to know that, I don't need to share that. I don't need to go, did you hear about this?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I think given the nature of the last 20 years, it would take a lot of building up of muscles in a person to be able to like do the turning away that something like that requires, and it's probably equipment that we should be like trying to build into our kids, if not ourselves. Here's the sin in it for me. And maybe this like will help to put a little finer point on the question you asked, Pipe. Like, I think when somebody relies on an audience for their livelihood, that does make it somewhat public. And what's more, when somebody, hires a photographer to take the perfect, like, posed over the shoulder, shimmering lake in the background Instagram shot to go with their like apostasy narrative, it is public. And the sin in my own heart, where I should be feeling compassion and sadness, and I should be compelled to pray for that person, when they turn it into a platforming moment, I just have the opposite reaction. And like that's the part that I think you're coming at rightfully. Like I need to soften my heart with regard to that. But it's hard when like the apostasy moment is accompanied by like a marketing push, and that's the part I have trouble with.
Yeah, and I get that. I think the thing that I've been kind of working towards, because I'm certainly not there yet, is that just because there's the opportunity to dunk on someone doesn't mean I have to.
Yeah, that's
theologically,
good,
argumentatively, platform-based, whatever. And because that whole mentality is really it's dehumanizing. A public announcement or something going public about somebody walking away from the faith ought to be one of the most sort of profoundly personal. And personal doesn't necessarily mean private, but it does mean like there are roots here that hurt. Like there's a taproot there, but we treat it like it's we would talk about it the same way that like when the new Avengers movie comes out and we're like, that trailer looked awful. Like I didn't like who they cast for this. I didn't love, whatever, those kinds of things. And they get basically the same treatment, except that people are heated about religious stuff and they're kind of generally lukewarm about, Marvel Comics.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Ronald, why do you think like everyone is so compelled to live a public life? Have we lost privacy forever?
I mean, I still think it's a choice. I think these social media platforms were really about interaction and engagement, and, they're in the same way that, when you go anywhere, when you go to any sort of social event, what you're really doing is you're going there to hang out and try to have some good dialogue or organize yourself around other people that have a similar interest as you. And so obviously that has completely spiraled out of control because, as all things do, it becomes something that, is now, the opportunity for somebody to personally, drive their brand or their position or their reputation or their fame or whatever it is. But I think people seeing that is now seeing that we have a particular kind of platform now that enables somebody to do that, there's all of these implications now that just kind of pop out of that. And so, there are still like just you can still come into some really good dialogues and conversations on social media. But what happens now is they quickly spiral out of control. And then if the platform, can be used for anything, which it is, there's nothing that people like more than gossip and slander, because at the end of the day, it's just self-righteousness.
Yeah.
And it's a way for us to feel better about who we are because we're certainly not as bad as them. And I think it's the age-old problem. It's the age-old sin. It's like I'm not as sinful. I'm more righteous.
Yeah.
And by looking at them, by pointing at them, by dialoguing about them, we prove that we need that kind of affirmation, that we long for, that we desire that kind of sinful affirmation. And man, it's so out of control. I mean, and I don't know that there's any reining it back. We have to take personal responsibility for these kinds of things, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there is a thing, like we have the opportunity to do what's happening on social media anywhere at any time. It's not just social. So it's like we have to purpose in ourselves to say, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Like, brother, I hear what you're saying, but I really don't want to talk about him in this way because I feel like we're stepping over a line. So let's not do that. I mean, we can, and again, where that line is, have we stepped over that line on this pod? I'm sure we have. We should probably own that a little bit. But I think, again, we're trying to be a little more satirical, and maybe that's an excuse. I don't know. I'm just here to dialogue. But so there is a line there, and that line can be super blurry, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good. And yeah, I mean, we need to take care lest we become like cynical and hardened to the degree that we can't even see it in our own hearts. But Pipe, I want to talk about how these stories are reported. And there's a newish job title that seems to be trending, and maybe this has been around forever, but it just had a different function in the past. But the religion reporter, which seems to be coded language for just religious gossip columnist. And it seems to be the distinct purview of the religion reporter to like break these apostasy stories. And I don't know, I'm a journalism professor. As I think about my students who I love working with and have gotten to know and really enjoy, I can honestly say I hope that 0 of them grow up to become religion reporters. It just seems like this is a gossip columnist with a different title. And talk about that a little bit, Pipe, and how these stories get broken and reported.
Yeah, journalism is. I'm not an expert in it, but from the outside, it seems that religion reporting has gone the way of most quote unquote news, where it used to be a reporting of what was or was not happening, what is or is not an issue for society, for a community, etc. And it has delved into what will draw the most eyeballs. Which is not to be conflated with news. That's often commentary. It's often special interest stories. If they call these religion special interest writers instead of journalists, I would probably feel better about it. I wouldn't like what they wrote, but fine. Those who have that particular interest, read up. It's so like if a religion reporter is writing on, there's a conflict about whether or not a mosque can be built in a community because the community is conservative Christian, but whatever. Like that's a news story because you're talking about religious liberties issues. You're talking about a civic thing, whatever. Writing about the son of a prominent theologian, and this one obviously strikes a little close to home. And I'm 100% sure I'm jaded and biased on this, but here we go. Writing about the TikTok following of a prominent theologian's son isn't news.
Right.
Prominence doesn't make somebody a figure worthy of news.
Right.
The impact of that story is negligible.
Yeah.
The purpose for that story is questionable. I don't know what was, I don't know what was being accomplished by that. The same is true for some of the stuff of like articles about, Dave Ramsey's company recently. There's some of that is news. Some of that is reporting facts of just, things that are controversial. Some of that comes off a lot like a hit piece and seems to be sort of baiting for a response. And the thing that religion reporters have learned, and there are really good ones out there who really do try to write meaningful stories about issues. Is that one of the best ways to get eyeballs on a story is if you can get two sides of an issue pissed off at the same time.
Yeah.
So if you can get conservatives and progressives mad at the same time, you can get evangelicals and, what are the ex-evangelicals mad at the same time. Congratulations, you doubled your audience. You're you're kind of, and then they start going at it and the thing goes viral. It's like it's a recipe for going viral.
Yeah.
And I just, I think all of that just gives me a real sense of like, it just feels gross to me. Like I feel like I need to go take a shower at a huge portion of these quote unquote religion news stories that I don't think are news. I think they're just hit pieces or gossip.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think to me too, like part of it is context. Like if that piece about your brother and TikTok had run in some like cut rate, third tier, I don't know, like, Pathos blog or whatever, like it would have made sense there. But the fact that it ran in the newspaper of record in the largest city in the world, like a paper that's been, I don't know, revered and respected for generations, like it just seems strange to me. And maybe it's because I have such a low view of TikTok. I don't know. But the fact that
I don't know why.
The fact that
awesome.
Yeah. The fact that a story about like some pastor's kid's TikTok like is getting traction in the New York Times. I don't know. That's a harbinger of like the apocalypse to me.
Of really good news, I think is what you want to say.
I think really good news is it's just a statement that it sounds weird to hear someone say it out loud.
So, Ted, as a journalism professor, maybe I don't know if this is a helpful question or not, but I'm gonna throw it out there, and you can just bat it down if it's not. If you were, if one of your students was like, I really have a passion for writing religious news, what kind of stories? Like, what are the filters you're telling them to look for? This makes a real story. This is just controversy. This is just gossip. Whatever. Like, what is that? What are sort of the filters as you think through it?
Well, I mean, I think it's different for a Christian, right? And this is a function of teaching in a journalism program at a Christian university as opposed to one somewhere else. But, you know, I think for us, the calculus is a little different. And, you know, by the letter of the law, this story probably makes sense, you know, in that there's an angle, there's a clearly defined angle, there's an audience for it, there's a little crackle of conflict, there's an interesting character or two. So like in terms of what makes a story, it probably checks all the boxes. But for the Christian, again, I just think the calculus is different. If we want to write stories that either report well, okay, so that kind of takes the news category. So like you said, we want to report truth. We want to do it well. There's nobility in that. But if I'm sitting down to write a feature or to give something kind of a feature treatment, you know, I want to look for stories that will honor the people involved and will edify, will build up. And do you sometimes have to do investigative work? You do, but I think you can do it in a way that makes it not a hit piece. And look, like there's a bit of guilt in my own heart when I say that, because, you know, your point, Piper, to the ultimate piece of media being the one that like angers progressives and conservatives. That was why we're not emergent, and it sold like gangbusters, right? So I get it, and there's a little bit of, you know, shame there, but yeah, I think that's kind of the nature of the conversation when I talk to my students about stuff like this.
Okay, yeah, I think that makes sense. And yeah, the point that you make about the calculus as a Christian is really significant, because yeah, I get it. You know, my dad has been influential. My brother now has a significant following. And the fact that both of them are so public is why I'm talking about this at all. Because if my dad was a pastor of a 300 person church in rural Minnesota and my brother decided he didn't want to follow Jesus anymore, I wouldn't talk about it on the podcast. Yeah. But because both of them, you know, between the two of them, there's like 3 million followers or something. Fine. Let's talk about this thing.
Can I say one more thing? And I want to get Ronald's feedback on this. This was actually in the context of a conversation that I had with one of Maxim's teachers yesterday, just randomly in the hallway, about this internet sensation turned boxer, Jake Paul. And the kind of point that we were making about this guy was, for a certain generation, for those who grow up like entirely native to social media, I really think they get they understand getting famous before they understand being good at something. And so Jake Paul learned how to get an audience before he learned how to be good at anything. And I think, to me, this is part of what's so heartbreaking about the your dad and your brother conversation. I mean, good, bad, or indifferent, your dad is famous because he was a good writer and he was a good preacher, before he got good at social media or whatever. And
I wouldn't even say he is good at social media. He just has a following.
Exactly. He just has a following. So I think we've flipped sort of, the model for how to be quote unquote successful, in that, people grow up learning how to gather an audience before they learn how to be good at a craft. And I think that's the part of this that maybe makes me the most sad. Like, if that article in a hypothetical world had been, famous evangelical pastor's son sells a painting for, $1.2 million, that would be a more interesting story, in that the angle for that story would be, your brother, even if he has wandered away from the faith, is really excellent at something.
That's what killed. You know what's funny? That's a funny example, because he is a really good painter. Like,
I know,
if you
right?
follow him on Instagram, he's a really good artist, and that wasn't the story.
Exactly. And I don't ever want to put words in your brother's mouth. I don't even know him, but in his heart of hearts, he would probably have rathered that been the story. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. Ronald, put a fine point on this.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, it's an amazing point. I think the value that we all carry, I think what has become the value now is being known. Yeah. And there's something very spiritual and interesting about it, even saying it like that.
Sure.
So it's not necessarily that we are like, man, we're a gifted person at some particular, craft or whatever the thing is, but it's something that we can gain a following that's just based on, that's just based on, something that makes us interesting to the general public. I mean, the Kardashians are like the cliched but like obvious example of this. You don't really know what they do. They don't really do anything. They're just known for being who they are. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just the age that we live in, to where it's really, we talk about more of people in the sense of the followers they have, or who they are, or what they say, or sort of some ridiculousness that they're known for, rather than something of value that they bring to the table that we can all discuss in a really constructive way. And I think you said it really well. And I think that the result of that is just this sort of this cultural. Sort of like this thinness, this cultural thinness, mm-hmm. that just says what's most important, what the greatest value is that people are actually talking about me. It doesn't matter what they're talking about me about or for. It's just that they're acknowledging me, they're noticing me. That's where I'm getting my value, my affirmation. And all of us, that's the place the heart bends, mm-hmm. But we really are. I mean, we are really, really seeking out that affirmation that we want is not a bad thing. It's just that where we're going to get it is never going to satisfy. And I think that's where the sadness comes in, because we all find ourselves bending and leaning that way in some ways, especially if we were given the opportunity. But it's a good longing with the wrong input.
Yeah. Well said, baby, for sure. Boys, we should wrap it. We've done what we always do on this program, in that we've made fun of a Matt Chandler Instagram post and then wandered to and fro throughout two really interesting topics. And until next time.
The Happy Rant is brought to you by Resonate Recordings. If you go to resonaterecordings.com, you can see the full range of services they offer. So if you're considering starting a podcast, they are the ones we recommend going with. Again, go to resonaterecordings.com to see their prices, to connect with them and ask any questions, and to see what they can do to help you launch, edit, master, and improve your podcast. Again, go to resonaterecordings.com to see what they can do to help you launch and improve your podcast.